I'm so glad you guys are here. I am Lee Shockey. I have been organizing Squatch off and on since the first one, and I don't remember when that was. 2015, 2016, 2016. So our moderator, well, I'm your moderator. Mike Cherba is our presenter. I wanted to just quickly remind you guys of the code of conduct, which is that Black lives do matter, be kind to each other, and please be patient with tech difficulties, which you already have, so I appreciate that. If you need assistance or have a question, please use the comment box and a moderator or volunteer will respond to you. And please encourage, and everyone, please use chat to communicate with each other and Q&A and ask questions for the instructors. I will be moderating the chat if it's on, and we'll jump in with questions for Mike if you so need them. So that is great. And we are also broadcasting from Duwamish territory, although Mike is in Oregon, so it might be a different one, but this is for Swordsquatch. So thank you, everyone. And Mike, I'll hand it over to you.
All right. Morning, afternoon, evening, all. I have Richard Tillman here from our group to assist me. We'll walk through a number of partner drills and pell drills today. So you guys should be able to see what we're talking about. But before we get started, I wanted to talk just a little bit sort of about what we mean by having an active buckler or active shield, and what we'll be doing today. So this class is applicable to really any style of sword and buckler, any style of sword and shield, but it draws heavily in the contents from two traditions. It draws very heavily from the Georgian Kepster Highland sword and buckler tradition that I study, and also from Bolognese for a number of concepts. And as we demonstrate what we're talking about today, we will attempt to demonstrate everything with a sword and buckler, and then with like a side sword or rapier and rotella, sort of to show the two ends, a very cut oriented with a small defense and a very thrust and oriented with a big defense. We can make myriad combinations, but we could spend 2 hours demonstrating all the combinations of one drill with different weapons if we did that. So what are we going to do today? We're exploring different ways to train and to develop what we call active buckler or shield use. And we'll use both modern training methods and training methods derived from the traditional ways that the Khevsur villagers would train their sword and shield, later sword and buckler work. Because for hundreds of years, they produced really, really good sword and pari. The Georgian word for pari means both a large shield or a small buckler. Like many languages, they don't differentiate between the two, and unlike English. So I will, except in a couple places where I mean specifically small or large, I will just use the word pari throughout. Fill in buckler or shield, whatever you have handy at that point. So to get the most out of this class, you want a partner to work with, or at least to have a pell or some kind of target to strike. Any single-handed sword and round shield or buckler will work. You could use a heater. You probably could even use like a kite shield or something, although I haven't run these drills with that. And so let's get started. The first question, why an active buckler? What does it mean to have an active buckler or active shield? And why does it matter? Right? We have some styles and some fighters. For example, if anybody knows sword and buckler well, you've watched Roland Borcheka fight. He has an amazingly active buckler in by his hand, and it covers the sword hand really well. And that is one piece of the puzzle of what we're trying to develop. But that by itself is not enough to be what we consider a fully active buckler or shield. So when we say active pari, what we mean is that the pari and your weapon are always supporting each other. And that can be the pari covers my sword hand. It can physically be the pari is bracing my sword. It can mean that the pari is creating an opening for my weapon to enter through. In a sense, once you get and truly develop an active pari, rather than fighting sword and buckler or sword and shield, you're really fighting buckler and sword, shield and sword. All right. So the first thing I want to cover sort of is the different motions of the buckler and of the shield. So I'm going to strap my shield, and Richard, I'm going to use you to demo the motions of the buckler. So with the buckler motion actions, right, if you go ahead and take like a decent guard, get the buckler out in front of you somewhere, right, and he's taking a Georgian guard, and from here he has choices with his buckler, right? The buckler can move side to side, he can clear the left and right, he can move up or down to the corners, and then the wrist turn, like with the dagger, down cover low, the low left cover, where you turn the thumb. Yeah, I'll show you this one, where it rotates. It buys you a little bit of extra space. But the things to think about is that buckler moves all around, in and out. He can punch it forward. He can bring it up. The buckler strikes. And then if I step in with the bigger strap shield, now a center grip shield moves essentially like a very large buckler, whereas the strap shield is going to move differently. And here we have, in essence, a vastly simplified version of the same actions. I can come over here, but not terribly well. I can come here, right? But most of my motions come from a rotation. Up in like a boxer's guard to the head or over, right? And I can come down, and I can punch forward, right? Those are my primary motions. I have other things I can do, like flaring the elbow to move things out, where I can twist one way or the other. But those are the primary actions of the same thing with a shield. At this point, we should pretty much be using these two interchangeably. So the next question in our intro session here is, we've talked about this, and we've talked about guiding and supporting. One of the primary supports is going to be, I hide my weapon hand behind, right? And we see this in Bolognese. You'll see guards where my weapon is behind and the point sticking out. In Georgian, it's extremely obvious, right? He structures his guard so that his hands are joined behind his buckler. If I were to come in and strike at any point, right, I come in and I cut, I can't get to his hands. Over here, hand is hidden behind. This is the most common form of support between the pari and the blade that we see. But it's not the only form of support between the pari and the blade. And there are going to be times when the right thing to do is that I leave even my shield behind and I reach forward, to stab somebody or cut them. So my first question for our audience here would be, when do we come forward? Can people make suggestions as to when you think it's appropriate to expose your hand? Inputs, thoughts from anyone? So I have my answers, but
yeah, we've got Alex chiming in the chat with contra tempo actions.
That can be one, yes. When we're attacking in counter time or defending in counter time. Any other suggestions? None? Okay. So places that I think of that we want to expose the hand, or where it's appropriate. If I have a big enough opening and I want to generate power, you will very often, you'll see I've come forward and I'll rotate through, right? These circular cuts appear in pretty much every sword and offhand. They're a power generation thing, right? And there, to do this effectively, I can't bring it here. Even if I can get through, I have no power, right? So I'll do This is a hallmark of certain sword and offhand systems. We see this a lot in Georgian. We see this a lot in Bolognese. We see this a lot in Razmov Tsar and the Persian stuff. I see this in African play. Pretty much in every cut focus system. Now, how much and where that we expose our hand also will depend on how much protection I have on my sword, right? So the difference between my sword and Richard's sword, you know, he's got almost no hand protection. I have a little more. The other weapon he's got over there has a little more yet again. If he was doing, you know, Spanish rotella and had a beautiful cup hilt on that thing, you know, he'd have more places where it would be safer to expose his hand and arm. But it is no mistake that when we look at forensic data from battles and cultures where there was heavy shield or buckler use in fighting, the vast majority of the injuries are to the forearms, the lower leg, and the head, because that's what has to be exposed to get the job done. And choosing when matters. That being said, the next piece of our puzzle is, cool, we don't want to expose our hand. We need to be able to thrust to a target without exposing it. Well, when we're using an active pari, how do we do that? Right? Because most people, right, if you learn single sword, right, you've learned, you know, I come in here and I, you know, extend and thrust in, you know, with movements of the feet. Well, if I'm using even a shield and I do this, my arm is out. I'm exposed. So how do I thrust when I'm doing this? And with the shield and with the buckler, this action ends up being similar. In Bolognese, they'll break the thrusts down to the rising thrust or staccata and the descending thrust or imbricata. In Georgian, we don't really make a distinction. We just thrust. But my thrust with an active pari, and I'll demo the large pari and Richard will demo the small pari or buckler, is as I come forward, I move the buckler or the pari and the sword together, and I come in and I covered together, right? And if we see, and I'll do this from the other side, right? If I'm thrusting towards Richard, stay where you are, you're too close now, right? As I come in here, I thrust together. My hand, you'll see, is protected from most of his blows, right? If, for example, he was set up for a backhand blow, right, I might come in with the same thrust here, right? I can rotate and move around, and coming the other direction, let's swap sides so the hand's visible, right? Against me, Richard will make the same thrust. So as he thrusts, he's going to come under cover of his buckler, right? And his hands are protected. Now here, you know, because of our measure, he can separate. Part of active buckler or shield use is going to be reacting. He sees the blow coming in, he's separated. He is still covering his hand, even though these two are not right next to each other anymore, right?
Hey, Mike. Hey, Mike.
And again, the buckler is, if anything, more versatile, because if I'm coming in with a backhand, and you can literally almost make the same thrust, right? As you come in with that cover, right? He's got always that line is covered, you know, and we're not going to fight. I could block with this, all that, blah, blah. We reach into the what if game.
Hi, Mike.
If you train this well enough, certain actions will start to happen almost before you realize you've moved, which is a really cool experience when you get there.
Hey, Mike, real quick, we just have a request from Max to tip the camera down a bit so that we can see the steps as well.
Oh, am I too high? Sorry.
Just a little bit. That's good, actually. Maybe just a tiny bit more.
Just a tiny bit more. Okay.
Just a tiny bit more. There you go. Thank you. And then
All
you
right.
want to stand about right there.
Okay.
Perfect.
So to re-show where the feet were visible, with the shield, and we can do these a lot of different ways. I've been demoing this as a pass forward, right? As I come in, I'm here and I'm safe from his cover, right? And whether I come to here or to here, you know, and here, doesn't matter so much, right? I could do the same thing starting right foot forward, right, and here. I can do the same thing with this, right? I can come in and make this thrust left foot forward. Footwork is a bit more flexible in some ways in this system, just to kind of touch on it, and probably why I wasn't thinking about it too hard. So that's a joined thrust. The other sort of thrust we want to talk about a little bit is a thrust around. So I have this lovely big pari, and if Richard wants to hit me, a straight thrust isn't going to do it, because this can cover a big chunk of me. So one of the ways an active buckler or shield is going to work is he's going to do something like check with the buckler, right, and thrust around. In this case, over the top, a plunging thrust. He could make a thrust around the side, right, or under the bottom, right? But he's going to make a thrust around. And the same thing is true for me, right? If we get in, Richard makes a strike, and I cover it, and I'll make a thrust around. So, you know, okay, it's a binary system. I make two forms of thrusts. I thrust joined, or I thrust around and separated. And this holds whether I'm doing shield or buckler or anything. It's just the size or the amplitude of the motion that changes. All right, going through basics here. The next piece, cutting. And cuts tend to fall into three different categories. Joined cuts, cutting to a join, or cutting from a join. And this is probably best demonstrated with the buckler, right? So let me get out of the way and actually just have you go ahead and cut on the pell, right? So a joined cut, right? And we see these in most systems where the hand and the offhand come forward together and cut. Now, he can also cut from a join, right, where he comes in and pushes that cut as his hands separate, right? Right, and this happens when the offhand moves to stay with something or to seek an entry. And then the other variant we see lots of are cutting started to a join. So you might start in a profile guard and cut forward in a big action. And these sorts of cuts are something we see a lot of in like Marazzo or the other Bolognese masters. All of these also hold with the larger and the strap shield, right? I can from here still cut joins. I can cut away from a join, right? So I'm in here and it becomes, right, that pull cut or push. And I can cut to, right? For different power generation. There is sort of a fourth cut where we start joined and end joined, but separate in the middle, right? And I would call a lot of our power generation cuts this, where I'm here and I come around and I rejoin. That same circular power generation we talked about, but I can also do the other way. Although in this variant, it's more a cutting to separation. You can kind of classify all your cuts there. But across pretty much every system, everything falls into one of those categories. Now, the big $300,000 question, right? We do HEMA stuff. There's tournaments. People like to hit hard. How do we generate power in this method? Because, you know, we're not lightsaber fencing. If I do this, it's going to annoy Richard, and he's going to proceed to stab me in the face or do something pretty heinous to me. So I have to be able to hit him with sufficient force. Now, I can generate a fair amount of force with these little snaps. And for those who do test cutting with sharps, I highly encourage you to grab a buckler and your sword. And if you don't want to worry about damaging your sword, use a wooden buckler or something. And try cutting that way with various degrees of force. With my good sharp Georgian blade, right, you know, this action goes about halfway through a tatami mat. All right, this action does the same with literally almost nothing from my muscles, just gravity. So we know that works. But if we really want to generate power, that's where our separation actions come, right? Either this, you know, and Richard makes this blow as he joins, he comes together, right? That's got power. He's driving it from his core, the movement of his body. He's gone from profiled one leg back to profiled the other leg back. And our buckler, his buckler in this case is active in the middle, right? The other variant would be that same circular cut joining from here, right? That comes around, and that, right? Basically, it's a coupe in Saber, a Molinelli. And we see this all the time. And this is a powerful strike, right? And we can play with hand-foot timing, depending on openings, depending on everything, to generate varying amounts of power there. So again, used correctly, that active pari helps generate power, right? I'm pulling apart, I'm pushing together, I'm joining and cutting with both arms, just like I'm using a longsword, right? You can think of joined long cuts as longsword cuts being performed with a sword and buckler. In fact, in the Georgian text, Elashvili literally tells us that if you need to and you don't understand sword and buckler, you can treat a sword and buckler like a 16th century longsword and do all of the same things with the buckler standing in for the strong of your sword, which is a concept I found is very helpful when we introduce longsword fighters to sword and buckler. All right, so we've talked about this, we've talked about that. Time to start the drilling. The first drill we're going to do today, no sword is needed. You will need your offhand and a bare hand, and you will need a pell or a partner. We will demonstrate these with buckler first, and then I will demonstrate the same thing. Then we'll demonstrate the same thing with the large shield. So, first drill, if you have a pell, really straightforward. We're basically going to set up, take your buckler, and we're going to throw boxing combinations, always leading, right, with something from the buckler hand. You know, I can throw a back fist, I can throw a hook, I can throw a jab, but my combos become, I'm always opening something and following behind it with my strike. For those working with a pell, questions there? Anything? Okay. So, for those working with a partner, this is a little more interesting because, well, one, we don't want to just hammer our partner. None of us are kitted for it, although I guess if he was wearing his jacket, I could punch him. That's plenty of padding. But here, what I'll do is I'll present a target with my buckler for Richard, and he will push and control with it, with his strike, and come in with this follow-up strike, right? So we set up, and he'll do the same thing again, right? And he'll try and control his buckler to move me and mine and create the opening he wants for his hand to move into, right? He lifts me and punches low. He pushes me to one side and follows on that side, right? Questions about this drill with a buckler? All right, let's grab the Rotellus and do the same thing with the big shield. So, demonstrating the same drill with a large shield. I have a lot of the same actions, but they change, right? I'm here working with this. I can, right? I can clear in different directions. The most basic and most important one is still going to be punch straight and follow with a straight shot or into the opening. When we do this with each other, again, right, I get set somewhere and Richard has to generate an opening. Or you want me to do it? Okay. Okay, so here, if I want to create an opening, I have choices, right? I come in here and this becomes in and down, right? We're here. And for those who couldn't see that, this crossed over. My shield is still blocking any counter from him, and the hand went through. If you remove the shield, can you just move right? My hand went through the gap I created, right? And similar options. It gets more complicated with the rotella because this covers more area. My openings are smaller. And I have to reach farther to get past my rotella and his. Measure's going to stay wider. So for this drill, the rotella version is harder, right? And then we can take turns, right? We're here. Now it's, Richard will start. He's got an opening. He's struck, right? We're in here, and I come in. Right, and you can see here, I countered the initial strike, and he just flowed the punch to a different opening. And we can level this up. Any questions? All right, so to save time on transfers, I'm going to just shift the same thing to the next version against the pell, and then throw masks on, and we'll go large shield on pell, large shield on each other, small shield on pell, small shield on each other. So now I've got the same thing, but I have a weapon in my hand, right? So I'm here, and I have to, right? I have to get in and, create an opening, thrust around, right? Create an opening, thrust around. Create an opening, thrust around, right? Or create an opening, cut. Create an opening, cut. Movements in and out. Let me grab my mask. This flapped up, Richard. Your bib is on. Right, so now, can everybody hear me okay through the mask?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So same drill. This time we have weapons, and the clear gets more interesting because I can't just clear his shield anymore. If I want to clear an opening for Richard, I have to manage to block out the sword and the shield, right? So this sweep is going to end up, here, right? And he'll do the same thing. He's got to catch both. Yep. And if I adjust, which I auto did, he comes to another opening, right? But if I screw up, let's say, right, I'm here, or I'm going to be, very much here for a second. If I screw up, let's say I take this and I go, he'll cover that, no problem, right? I have to pick up both. So these drills they make me do two things. One, they get used to, right? I'm in here, Richard goes to strike me, and it's a crashing. I'm getting used to an impact on my buckler. Whether it's me striking to him or him striking to me, my buckler or shield is taking impacts. I'm getting hit a lot. And if you're going to fence active pari, active buckler, active shield, you have to be comfortable with and used to those impacts. The other thing is that this puts us in the mode of, two modes, both from sort of Kepster. First, if my sword wants to go to work, my offhand clears the way, right? If we're here and I just thrust, even under cover, I'm not going to hit him, right? If I want to hit him, I either need to feint him out of the way to create an opening, or I want to create an opening with my offhand, right? If I can clear, you see, so there, what happens? All right, I came in, I cleared this way, and I pivoted around away from the weapon. One example of a bazillion, but I have to deal with both, and I can create openings with my offhand. That's a big part of what we mean when we say active offhand, is that unlike a passive offhand, no matter how well it is covering my sword hand, right? I could fight, and we see this a lot in Bolognese fencers, especially with rotella, right, or buckler. This stays out here. It doesn't move much. And I cut around it. I do, it does a good job of covering my hand, but I'm not using, this is a static thing. And once your offhand becomes static, it's defending the other fencer too. if I hold my offhand out like this, and I'm never moving it, Richard knows where my sword, it's in the way of my stuff too, right? So there's all these angles I can't strike. So let's see how this works. Actually, I have you put your back to the camera, and I'm gonna stand here, right? So with this out here, I have angles I can't hit. I can hit around here, and his rotella covers much of it, right? I can kind of come to here, versus if I have an active and moving offhand, right? There is no angle that I can't come from fluidly, around, from everywhere, right? And it doesn't take a lot of movement. If you notice there, I moved what, maybe 6 inches total, you know, in a realm, but some action. And I believe this is part of why a lot of people miss this. A lot of the manuscripts don't seem to be talking about it, but like if you read, you know, in Georgian, it's very explicit. If you read Marazzo, his instructions on sword and buckler or sword and rotella, he's constantly telling you, move your rotella like this, move your buckler like that to accomplish your ends, usually to engage your opponent. Let's see. I guess we're on to the small ones. So, demonstrating the same level of drill versus pell and versus each other with the small pari and the sword. Right? So the same thing on my pell, right? I'm going to enter and come behind, enter and come behind, right? And then again, with a person, this is where it gets really interesting, because I don't have the big, round offhand that covers square feet of space. I have one little, like, 12-inch offhand that covers a very small area, right? So we're here. How do I do, and we're in Georgian guards here. Here, if I can get in and crash, I can pin both pretty well. But if he's cagey or he's a Bolognese style fencer and he's separated, how on earth do I, right? If I try and crash and take the buckler, I'm vulnerable. So I have to figure out ways. And this drill is really great for strategic and tactical thinking, right? How do I get in, right? And I'm here, right? I can do things here. I'm going to feint. I'm going to draw him out, right? I want to come here, right? Or I'm going to use a blade action, right? So it looks like I'm snapping the chest to the face. Okay, he's covered with that active pari, and I'm still open, right? He can come crashing in. So if I want to get that pin and the entry with this, I'm going to have to work, right? So this is going to happen. I'm going to come. So go ahead and just naturally cover, right? So I'm in here, and we'll see something where I'll come here, and I have to move quickly, right? If I can check him, and then what do I do here? We check, and I'm coming away from his weapon, right? Trying to clear that space. If we rotate, you can see, right? I'm trying to clear that space where he has to cut around his own buckler arm. So I'm trying to turn his extended arm into something. With a buckler, it's actually really challenging to get a full pin in a set drill like this. It's actually easier if you're fencing and the opportunity comes up. But we have to watch and pay attention for it, right? So if we're in here, there's going to be places, right, as I shift guards where Richard is going to see an opportunity, right? And if I can, we're going to work around. Boom. He joined. That's my opportunity. As soon as his hands come close during a guard transition, during something, that's my opportunity. So what happened? He went to make a cut, and that's where I checked. Because as soon as he's cut together, I have an opportunity to capture both, right? He can swing under, but I can force, I can follow, I can stab and get out. There's a short opportunity. But to take advantage of it, I need an active pari. If I try to go into that without the active pari, right, make that same join, right? We're here, and I tried to do this. That's bad for me, isn't it? Right? He just adjusts a little. So the active pari creates our openings. Now, here is an example, a very strong example through these drills of the other principle that we talk about a lot, the 3 S's: seek, suppress, strike. So what happens? What am I trying to do here? Right? As he joins, I seek his weapons. I'm suppressing. I've placed them together, and I'm preventing movement. Right? And only then do I strike. Right? For the sword to go to work, the pari made my path. It created my opportunity. And this is what we mean by active buckler. And these first drills are there to create tactical thinking. Where can I use this offensively? And getting used to impacts. I've noticed this a lot with new buckler fighters. If somebody's like out here, if you don't use to impacts, that throws people. That punch right there throws people, right? If we're out here, and reset for a second, and I'm out here, and Richard just strikes with his sword to my buckler. Strike with your sword to my buckler, right? If I'm not used to impacts and he cuts hard, people naturally flinch away, and that creates an opening. We have to get used to impacts and hard impacts on the pari, whether it's a large rotella or a small buckler. All right. Let me flip pages in my lesson plan here. So, the next drill here is, we already sort of did this, but the drill being a partner version where, let's walk through it very briefly. Put the sword down for a second. We do this with and without the sword, but the first variant is really straightforward. The attacker will strike first with the buckler, right? And then one or more times with the hand, and we'll repeat that with the sword variant, which we're not going to do today. But then we take away the designated attacker. So Richard and I are both just doing this, and we're looking for opportunities, right? And you'll notice here, the buckler doesn't stay static. I'm not presenting him with a target, right? I have to see an opportunity, right? And he can do the same, right? And if I leave static, if I sit here too long, even here, right, he's got a target to acquire. We see this in old-fashioned, boxing as well, where the hands are always moving, and we're doing this with the buckler, right? I'm in here, and I'm always moving. Here's my drills, and I'm looking for an opportunity. Yep, I'm fine, right? We're in, right? And there I successfully countered, right? He did it, and I countered with, by counter punching and moving away. And these drills are great drills. First for this, then for the other. For those who want something really quick and wicked, if you have a training dagger, do dagger and buckler. Especially if you have a larger, like Kanjali, Kinjal style training dagger. These drills get wicked, truly wicked. They're in close and dirty, and they're so much fun and fast react. But if you can block those close ins at speed, the slower sword from a wider measure gets easier. All right, on to my favorite bit now. We have the Kepster puzzle drills. I want to quickly check where we stand time-wise. So, when I say a puzzle drill, what do I mean? So, for myself and many others who came to historical fencing, we came via one of a couple of routes. Many people come from Eastern martial arts, right? Where a drill is, here is this technique or this combination of techniques. Perform it repeatedly. You come from sport or classical fencing, where again, a drill is, all right, you and your partner, we're going to do, you're going to get a provocation, disengage, and counter, and we build these 6, 7, 8 move long pieces to build mental flexibility and stuff. This is great. And this is what most Westerners expected when they would view a fencing sala back in the day. There's a master and his lieutenants, and everybody is doing orderly drills, either training with somebody one-on-one, or the group is out there following the lead of an assistant instructor, doing common actions or repetitive practice for something in the corner that they were given. And then you go to Khevsur, and it doesn't look like that. And in Khevsur, you'd walk into the training hall, which was also the social center for the village, and it looks like chaos. No two pairs of people training together are doing the same thing. Oftentimes they're doing weird ass stuff like fencing from like way too close, kneeling on the ground and things. And outsiders are like, what the bleep is going on? How the heck did these guys produce such good fencers? It must just because they practice all the time since they're like 5. Okay, lots of practice is good, but lots of good practice is better. Instead of doing repetitive actions or prescribing techniques to fit a situation, the Kepster approach to training, and one that we've begun adopting and using in our own training very successfully, and that works really well for developing active offhand, is that instead of saying, do this thing, they'll give you a goal or a puzzle and tell you to solve the puzzle. And the puzzles are designed to hone your skills. So the first puzzle we're going to cover today is one of my absolute favorites to do. This one requires a partner, and it requires a partner who is working in a very conscientious manner. Because what we're going to do here is that I have 2 swords, and Richard gets only his pari, right? And I'm going to deliver blows that he's going to cover. Now, I have 2 swords. It would be really easy for me to cut him in ways that it's hard for him to cover, right? I can come in and do this, right? There's no way he's ever going to cover both of these. He's making the right choice in covering his head. If you have to choose between your head and a leg, probably cover the head. But that's not my goal. My goal isn't to hit Richard. My goal is to make Richard work as hard as possible, covering himself successfully most of the time. If we do this drill correctly, he's going to get hit, but he shouldn't be being hit repeatedly. If I start hitting him too many times in a row, we'll break and reset. So in practice, this drill looks like this, right? He's got this, and I begin gently. And as I go, I'm going to speed up. Right? If I'm hitting him too much, I'm backing down. No, you need to adjust the mask. Okay. Right. So again, we'll get in and start. Every time we start, I'll start gently, and we'll ramp the speed. When I hit him one way, I often will try it a second time. Hard things to cover here tend to be thrusts. But you'll notice that he's not backing away. In fact, he's coming forward, right? He's trying to check my weapons up at the base and early in the swing. It's better for him to stop me here than to wait and stop me here, because that means he's got less time to acquire and seek the next blow. So as the buckler person, you learn to be very aggressive with this. Now, we can get to an intensity and hold there, and that's a lot of fun. And we do this with just the buckler regularly. If I decide that I want to be really nice, and I give Richard something like grab your sword, he's going to be in the same role, right? Only now he gets the sword, and life gets way easier. No, you're not going to counter. you're defense only still, right? It's just now you have the sword. Keep them joined. Don't give me the opening down the middle. All right. Even very still, very offensive defense, but you can see initially on those blows where he was moving before, now he's got this advantage. My hand with the join, I can't get around as easily. It's bigger motions. It slows me down. And he can support, right? I've come in before. If I'd have done this with just the buckler, he's hosed. With the buckler and the sword, right? He's joined. The sword and the buckler are supporting each other. All right? So we can do this same drill with the large shield. And this time we will flip and you'll deliver the blows. Let me throw my mask on. What? Yeah, it's 11. Yeah, I'll get some water as soon as we're done with this drill.
You can also run a little long if you like. Our tournament is not going to be starting until 11:30.
All right, so here, I'm cheating. I made him do the hard one. I have the hard one. So the secret is, this is not actually that much easier. Ah, man, I love these drills. They're intense and they're fun. If I sit here and do not if I try and fence this like we see so much done in Bolognese, right? Fencing out there. I can't move my body fast enough if I leave this in place. I have to. I have to move. And honestly, there's no substitute for just doing these drills a whole bunch. All right. I'm going to grab water for just a moment here before we move on from here to our first pari riposte game.
Something I've noticed with this is as the drill, especially the drill we just did, your left hand becomes instinctively seeking their weapon. So it starts turning off part of your brain that is thinking about what's going on. So your hand acts in instinct. I mean, attack here. I go to this segment. Here, my hand is moving immediately to intercept that incoming attack and following through, often not meeting it at the weak of the blade, but meeting at the strong where I can suppress and control their sword arm and create those openings I need. Yeah. And it just becomes instinct.
Yep. A great example of somebody who does something akin to this well in the hemisphere. In terms of aggressive buckler use, Miroslav Leshakov from Modus in Bulgaria does a pretty good job with it. I'm trying to think who else I see that I'd be like, oh, this person does this really, really well. And there's not a whole lot of it. I don't know that any of us can claim to do this well yet, but we're working on it. All right, so all of this being said, we're going to do our first sort of pari riposte puzzle drill. And this is going to look a little funny. This is actually taken straight from Georgian stuff. And for this, we will need the small buckler, our masks, a sword, and that should get us started. So we won't spend too much time on this one because, to be quite frank, it's uncomfortable. So what we're going to do is we will squat or kneel. It depends on what people prefer, how they do that. Yes, you get the right idea with the knee protection and all the padding today. I'm the idiot that's doing this in shorts. So we're going to set our measure such that each of our swords reaches the other person's shoulder, but just barely. And this is actually really simple. I have my sword, I have my buckler, and we're going to play a little game. The goal for each of us, right, for Richard, is to hit me in the head. right? And we can initially do a designated attacker. So, you know, it's Richard's turn. He's going to hit me in the head. I'm going to try and cover it, right? And we'll do sets of like 5 or something, right? Really simple, right? And then it's my turn. And I want to do the same thing, right? So we'll be here. Right? And then we play with different guards. You know, we're being Georgian, which this is our common guard. But you can do this from wherever, right? I'm here. And we're cutting to the head only, right? So it's Richard's turn again. And I can play with, can I cover with just the buckler? Do I need the 2 join, right? Can I cover this way? What can I cover with this? All right, that takes away one line pretty well, right? He got through the end. Then we take away the designated attacker. This makes life way more fun. Suddenly, we have a game of tag. Right? This is challenging. We've played this game a lot, and it's still hard, right? The next progression from here becomes we stand up again. Woohoo! Now we're standing. We're still not going to move our feet. We're going to pick a stance and hang in it, but I can shift my body weight side to side, and I can lean where I couldn't before. Same game, right? We're here, and we're doing mistimed that, right? Phase 2 of the game. Phase 3, we do the same thing, but now we get to move, right? So we're both I didn't get the suppression. I seeked, right? So what did I do there? We're in, I got to move. I'm trying to seek suppress to get my strike. And after I got it, he wrapped over the top, hit me anyway. Got to move my body more. I didn't get this large by expending energy. Right? Questions on this game, this puzzle, right? For each of us in this puzzle, our goal is to regularly tap the other person's mask without being touched. If I had to say, I would say today you were doing a better job of that than me.
You're distracted.
Doesn't matter. It's good. I'm trying to give you a compliment, man. You did well. Questions here? Otherwise, what we'll do is we'll move on and demonstrate the same thing with the large shield and a more thrust-oriented sword, but we will be sticking to the cuts. Any questions so far on anything?
Just a comment that those drills look like a ton of fun. I can't wait to try them.
Oh, these are a blast, an absolute blast. I haven't figured out a way to make this sequence work well with a longsword yet, but for anything with an offhand, this is fun. If you shorten the weapon and give a short, sharp offhand, like short sword and dagger, this gets really, really fun. So we're going to go ahead and demonstrate this with side sword and rotella. All right.
One thing to note with this is we can be relatively safe because our target area is the head where we're both wearing masks. So we don't have to, so that eliminates a lot of possibility of hitting in the body where we're less protected in this demonstration. So it's a good way for newer people who may have minimal equipment to be able to build up some intensity.
Yeah, especially with the larger shields, because getting through these to even get to the mask gets harder. All right, so here again, we'll start squatted and set our measure. You'll notice we're a little farther apart now. This is why I love demoing this with Richard. He and I are close to the same height. Right, so now this becomes really challenging, right? Because I can almost just keep my shield up here. I thrust that time. My apologies. We're not doing that drill. No. Right? Yeah. We're here. Right? You know, and he's going to have to. And to get through on these in particular, to get through on these in particular, I end up having to use a flurry of blows. I'm going to have to pop somewhere to move the rotella and then come back. Glasses okay? Yeah. Okay. So here we end up striking each other with the large offhand is in many ways more difficult, but it gets tiring faster. Holding that, even these very light rotellas that were made out of sleds get tiring after a while. Do this with like a large overbuilt, you know, Scandinavian round shield, and your arm will be dying in minutes. But we know this is how people fought, and it gives us a really good clue as to why most surviving shields are much lighter than people think. They're made from thinner, lighter, softer wood, and they're not expected to survive undamaged. And they're not expected that the way I use a shield is I hold my shield out and Richard hacks away at it till he gets through it and reaches me, right? That's not how we use a shield. If we were going to do that, then we would end up looking much like we see in certain places, right? Where the shield is heavy and held into the body, it doesn't move, right? And we do all these cuts around. We don't want that in a historical sword and shield. We need that movement. So just like with the smaller, now we're moving, we're standing. We're not going to move our feet, but we're set our measure. We can reach each other, you know, basically shoulder to shoulder. We take our stance, and then we play. And one of the real dangers here is that I block my own view, right? I can't see what Richard's doing now. So as soon as my hand comes down, I can get hit, right? So, aha. I lost my balance. Bad me. And then the third variant of the same thing, right? I didn't cover myself well enough, right? And here we're basically free sparring with a limited target of cuts to the head. Woohoo. But with a rotella and a lightweight sword and a mask, we can go pretty dang near full tournament intensity without much risk. Questions on this set of drills?
Yeah, so I have a question. So how tall would you say you are, Mike?
Well, I always think of myself as 6'4", but my doctors tell me I'm closer to 6'5" than 6'4".
Okay.
And Richard's about the same height.
Okay, so I'm 5'4" on a good day. When you guys are doing those drills on your knees, how would I, as a much shorter fencer, defend from those big overhand cuts you guys like?
So you're gonna laugh. On the knees part, is actually almost easier for a shorter fencer because you have less to cover. I think you've met one of our fencers, Sage, is very petite as well. And she is disturbingly scary at these drills. Because for me, right, do you mind taking me for just a second? We're going to simulate this environment, right? I'm going to kind of squat and he's going to kneel, right? So we're making this difference here, right? And so I have limited, like I can't come around and draw him wide. He's just got the top to cover. Now, he'll have a harder time getting to my head. Let me put my mask on. But he has an easier time protecting his own. So there's trade-offs. In terms of what the shorter fencer does, well, you know, I'm here, and there are also opportunities where if he can draw me up, right, he does something and I come up, he comes around, right? I've come here and then he comes around with it. He's going to try and create openings and come in the middle. If I'm good about keeping myself together, right, and cover, it's harder, but it's still right up here. Right, as soon as I try and attack, I have a point of exposure. Whoops, my notes are trying to fly away. Excuse me.
As the person in the shorter end of this, I actually found the drill easier because, like Mike said, I have this large shield to cover from, and I've got less to cover, and I've got a shorter. The angle also gives me an advantage with the shield. I felt very safe standing like this and then tapping him anytime I saw an opening. I knew he wasn't going to get me very easily.
Did that cover the comment adequately?
Yeah, it did. Thank you.
Cool. All right, so now we've been busy cutting each other. Yay. But cutting is only half the battle. Well, a quarter of the battle, since half is knowledge, so a quarter is cutting and the other quarter is thrusts. I guess parrying comes under knowledge. We're going to start an equivalent series of drills with the thrust. Only because of the nature of the thrust, we actually start this from the opposite end. So we will begin upright and out of measure, right? With a designated attacker and defender, right? And all I'm doing here in the beginning, right? We're out of measure. I cannot reach him. He cannot reach me without one of us passing, right? So we're here, and I have to do something to reach him, right? So what am I going to do here? I'm just going to practice. He's the defender, I'm the attacker. I'm just going to practice trying to get through, and he's going to cover, right? We're here, right? And he's got a chance to freeform, try different defenses, right? If I screw up, right, he would be able, we can see, like my arm's exposed, bad things can happen to me, right? I want to keep my thrusts covered or, you know, right? I made a thrust around, clearing an opening with the rotella, right? And we play this at measure. Then, as always, we take away the designated attacker defender, and we're just looking for openings. But this time it's a thrust, and a thrust to anywhere. And what you'll find here is that most of your opportunities come when somebody sees an opportunity and screws it up, right? Or you can draw somebody into one, right? We're both here, and something happens. I come over here, Richard sees opportunity, right? We have options here, right? So again, at this level, we're just here looking, and you'll notice, just like before, we're not static. One of the other reasons not to be static is that if I'm static and I go to thrust, he knows exactly what's coming, right? If I'm moving and that same thrust comes, he's got less opportunity to read what's happening because the activity of my offhand hides my intent, Again, active pari. So we're at wide, we're doing this. The next stage of this is to come in the opposite sequence. We're going to set our measure so that we can reach each other with a thrust. So it'll be a little wider than if we were cutting, but we're not going to move our feet now. And we're going to play this same game. We're making it harder. Right? So each stage, just like before, as we started tight and moved out, landing a cut got harder. As we start wide and move in, landing a thrust gets harder because the defense covers more and quicker. Plus, the real danger with a thrust tends to be, right, that my thrust hits before he knows what's happening. So we start where we have time to recognize it and pick it up. Now we have less time and it's harder to open our area, right? So we're here and you'll start to see that, you know, okay, I landed a thrust to his flank. How did I do it, right? We had an exchange, then I picked up the sword with this and thrust around his rotella, right? Took me 3 actions to land a thrust. Whereas when we were wide, I might get it with 1. Next stage of this is, oh gee, you guessed it. We're going to make it harder yet again, right?
Am I still in frame?
Yes, you are. Yep.
Thank you.
Right, so now we're here. We're well in measure, and it's a lot easier to cover all of us now. Oh, did I get the hand?
Yes.
I thought I just hit the guard. Cool. Okay. Whew. I thought I cleared it and it still came in to the inside of the forearm. Right? So this game gets really hard. And we can go pretty intensely here for a while and not land much. Right? If anything, I'm giving him a target he's not giving me because of the way I'm squatting. My right knee becomes, you know, reachable. But
I have to open myself up to
get there.
So it's not necessarily a good target.
Right? So this is the same sequence. So with cuts, we start close and move out. With thrusts, we start wide and move in. Right? And then the same thing, and we'll do this with the smaller bucklers and a more cut-oriented blade. We'll run through the same sequence again, then we'll pause for water and questions. All right, so same thing, at measure, right? And very quickly, we're out of measure. We have to enter initially Richard's designated attacker on the designated defender, right? And he's still trying to land a thrust.
Oh, thrust, right.
But, right? And then we move to no designated attacker or defender. And I might play. But I open myself to the afterblow, right? At measure, and this gets hard. Now, this one gets really challenging as we freeze our feet, right? We're in here, right? And we can reach. I like grabbing blades. Sure, just disengage. On the hand, on the knuckles, right? So we're here, and these games are the time to play with things, right? So I'm here, and can I bury, right? We're here, can I bury a cut, you know, a thrust into a faint cut, right? I'm here. I cut his arm, that doesn't count, right? but these are individual steps. And even here, we're like, okay, I came around my auto cut. All right, stop, reset, back to the thrust. And then we really, really want to make it hard. Bucklers and very cutty swords, kneeling with only thrusts allowed. This is fun, right? So we got to make sure we can reach. Right? Can we reach? There we are. Yep. Oh, sure. I hit you. You weren't stopped. Thanks. I get it. I get it. I let my hand go in front of my buckler. I'm not supposed to do that. All right, you have to make a point and hit that knee, didn't you? All right, so again, you know, at this point, I think we're getting a little drill happy. We're going to take a pause for questions and get some water, and we'll move on to the next drill. Questions while we're hydrated.
All right, so we've got a question from Alex. So we've got 2 questions. And just a reminder, we'll need to cut this off in about 10 minutes or 11 minutes. So we've got
11 minutes.
Yes. What our first
Okay.
question is, can you adapt these drills to 2 weapons and no pari? Let's say sword and dagger.
Absolutely. You know, a classic form of this, right, for people who fight like rapier, replace the rapier with a dagger, or replace the pari with a dagger. You could do sword and axe, sword and dagger. I mean, sub in whatever you want in the offhand. And you can do different limitations for the different. So you can say, my primary is only allowed to cut, but my offhand is only allowed to thrust to score, right? You can limit these in arbitrary ways. There's very nearly infinite variety.
All right. And then we have one more question, which is, how can I adapt these puzzle drills to work on specific things I need to work on? Let's say defending against a specific action.
All right. So some of that's going to depend on what the action is you're trying to defend against. So what you would do there probably is to create an asymmetrical puzzle drill where one person is given one set of limitations that encourage the action that you want to defend against, and you're given a different set of limitations that guide how you're responding to it, right? So let's say I am struggling very hard to work on covering a thrust to my lower left, right? Because this is something actually I struggled with for a long time. So what I might do is I might tell Richard, hey, when we play this, your goal in this drill, right, as we play is going to be, you're going to thrust to my left thigh. Like, that's your goal today. You want to hit me in the left thigh, right? So now I don't have to worry about getting the same thing every time, but I know he's going to be targeting things in a way that create where what I need to train against will arise spontaneously, right? And my goal is probably, you know, obviously not to get hit in the thigh, but I'll riposte with, say, a thrust to the torso, right? So we've given targets. His job is to hit me in the thigh. Mine is to hit him in the body. And go, right? And what'll happen there is that Richard's going to do what he needs to try and draw me out of place, prevent me from protecting my thigh. Whereas I'm going to try and set up all my defenses such that I can quickly respond to the thigh. And that makes a big difference in terms of causing the situation without making it repetitive. Anything to add on that one, Richard?
No. Did you cover that you might cut out some actions within that? Like literally you are not. So.
Oh, yeah. So additional restrictions.
Yeah, something I was bringing up with that is you might add in additional restrictions. So not only does Mike have to strike me in the torso with a thrust, he might not be able to cut at me from above or something like that. Something that gives him some additional restraints to work in the scenario that he wants.
Yeah.
Or we might say cutting is not allowed or whatever. Something to change the game with the restraints.
You know, for example, I always defend against my thigh the same way, right? We did this without restrictions, and now I'm covering my thigh, but we noticed that I'm always covering it the same way, which makes me vulnerable to something else afterwards, right? And we want to get rid of that bad habit. So what we do then is we say, all right, I have to cover this, but I'm not allowed whatever the prior action to set it up that I was using is, right? Force me to develop a second response. And then when we restrict, I have more, when we remove restrictions, I have more options and I'm less readable. One of the advantages to drilling like this is that you end up with embodied knowledge within your community that you train with, rather than embodied knowledge in an instructor, right? So a traditional model of Western swordsmanship is, you know, the maestro or the coach teaching and people following. And this isn't necessarily a great model for those of us who are pursuing historical swordplay, because even those people who've been doing this the longest, right, who transitioned from classical fencing 25 years ago and doing HEMA, or people who fought, you know, SCA and transitioned or did this or did that, or Eastern martial arts, most of what we're working on, unless you're an Olympic fencer, is rebuilt, you know, in the last couple of decades. So the sets of embodied knowledge in individuals is much smaller than it is in a longer living tradition. And we can do a lot better by building and using the knowledge bases in our groups, our bodies of senior practitioners together and sharing. And this approach becomes one of, you know, hey, you know, I'm really struggling with this. Mike's not helping me. Hey, Richard, you're really good at, you know, dealing with when people do X. You know, give me a puzzle. How do I deal with this? What can I go to do to practice to get, you know, what did you do to learn this, right? And then Richard, I did this drill a whole bunch, or try this one, right? Because that happens to be something that he's focused on because, I don't know, he struggled with it or he just really loves it or whatever. All right, so Lee, how much time do we have still at this point?
So the tournament live stream is starting in about 5 minutes, but serendipitously, I shared to my channel, made it public, and shared to Swordsquatch. So we can actually double live stream. I would say that we've been going now for about 90 minutes, and it's up to you. Maybe another half hour.
Okay, we can do that. We can drop short. I mean, I'm in a good spot from here. We could pause here, or I've got, let's see, 1, 2, 3. I have like 3 additional main sets of progressions prepared for today. Mm-hmm. But I also have my the notes with all the additional drills and stuff that, you know, we can attach to this when it goes up. We can post them somewhere. So
why don't we just see how many progressions you can get through before noon?
All right.
All right.
Let's do that then. All right. Next progression is what we like to call the Tick-Tock Drill. And this is really intended to teach a very specific transition with the sword, with the buckler or the shield. And while Richard is getting his mask on, I'm going to talk about what this is for a second. So, one issue that we see a lot of in buckler fighting is that if I cut here and I want to cut here, right? With just the sword, this is really easy, right? Boom, boom. Wow, life is good. But when I do this with the buckler, if I come here, now I'm on top. And super braccia in the Bolognese tradition, this is not a good place to be. Because if I'm here, most likely, any counter strike is going to come from above. which my hand is vulnerable. Where I want to be is I want to go from here to here, where my hand is under, right? So there, if his counterbolt comes, my whole buckler's in the way, right? So how do we get there, and how do we practice this? For buckler, the transition we use is this. I start here. As this comes up, my buckler rolls around and comes back, right? Without a strike, this looks like a metronome. And if I'm doing this right, I can be right up against my pell. I'm not coming forward at all. So, but that's not terribly useful by itself because I'm not hitting anything this way, right? So what I end up doing is this, boom, boom. What I call Tick-Tock Drill, right? Back and forth. And we demo this with a partner, and we will we're here, and as usual, initially we have a designated attacker and defender. We're being very Georgian, starting here, right? But I'm going to cut, right? And my goal here is really simple. As the attacker, I want to draw him so far one way I can come back, right? So what I want here is going to be something like this, right? Where I can make my cut and be successful on the second follow-up from the other side. And it doesn't really matter which side I do first, right? You know, I've been coming here, that's one, but I could equally well go here, right? And let me double check how I wrote down to do this one today. We begin in measure. I want to make sure I follow the progression as I wrote it. So here, progression 1 is literally, right, we've done this, right, and we have designated attacker defender in measure. I take my turn, Richard takes his turn.
I'm not as good at this as he is, as you can see.
Right. So the next progression, we're going to add in the diagonals. Now we have 2 diagonals. There's an easy diagonal and a hard, and we'll do the hard one first. So the hard diagonal is going to be cutting my descending right and ascending left, right? So against my pell, you'll see something like this, right? This is akin to my flat and flat. Oh, here I'm going 1, 2, right? 180 degrees, boom, boom, right? So we'll go ahead and we'll practice that sequence, right? So I'm here, and from here I want to. And this is a harder one to cover against with that level shift, right? And then it's Richard's turn. He's going to come there. Right? But even here, the covers are relatively easy. I know what's coming. We add in the easy diagonal. Easy diagonal is the fun one. I go upper left, lower right. I don't have to do a buckler movement here. So this one gets really fast. Right? So we practice just that piece. Right? Right? And then it's Richard's turn. From this quadrant, please. Upper left, lower right. Or go lower right, upper left. So lower right. There's also this, right, which forces me to cover differently. And in these drills, you see why the Georgians use this linked guard all the time. practice it using your system, your pieces. Once we have trained all of the diagonals, the next stage of this becomes still a fixed attacker, fixed defender, no movement of the feet. But the only restriction now is that my 2 blows must come from opposite sides of the body. So I may make any of these 3 blows followed by any of these 3, or vice versa. Any of these 3 followed by any of these 3, right? So now it gets interesting because I have the quick and dirty where I come high, right? Or I can play right? But I'm constantly playing around my own buckler, and I have to transition sides. And then I have to defend, right? So now it's Richard's turn. I was too quick on the defense. Right, and then the next stage of this progression, nope, we get rid of attacker defender. All right. So now it's the 2 of us, and we're both going to try, but what happened there? I think we caught on the roll tip. Yeah. Right, throw that repetition out. Equipment issue. Right? So we do this for a bit. Now, on this one, we're going to go ahead and get rid of the don't move our feet. So now we can play this. Yeah. But if I do this right, what happens there? We came in together, and we come to the other. I should be able to cover and still make a blow. Did I do it? No. Is it the goal? Yes. Am I still learning? Yes. Are we all forever? Yes. Right? So we're here. Touch me off. You're just waiting for me to stop afterwards and hit me, aren't you? Tells me what I got to work on. Given patterns. I don't like given patterns. All right. Any questions on Tick-Tock Drill? No? Cool. All right. So next drill, cuts into thrusts. Here, there's only one progression in this basic drill. We will start out of measure with the designated attacker. And I will apparently spill my water all over myself. Sorry about that. Right. So this is what we call the cuts into thrusts drill. And we can do this. Oh, we forgot to do the other one with the rotella. Let's just run through with the buckler to get the progressions through, and then if we have time at the end, we'll loop back and do them with the rotella. So what we're going to do in this version is we begin out of measure with a designated attacker, in this case me, right? We're out of measure, and my whole goal is to throw a series of cuts, feints as cuts. And as soon as I get something that I think it looks like he bit on, I'm going to go ahead and transition to a thrust to attack. And this is going to be tough because he knows I'm feinting with the cuts. So I have to get through that conscious, nah, I'm safe, and pull him into something I can use. Right? So we're here. All right. Now, I said feint, and then I cut and drew across his buckler. I consider that a feint because it wasn't going to reach him, and we both knew that. But, you know, you can restrict that if you feel the need, right? That I'm here, right? I'm going to be playing. Once I've made my thrust, I back out, and then we progress to we take turns, right? So we're here, and I've had my turn. Now it's Richard's turn. He's going to try and feint me into a reaction from thrust through. So take turns, one at a time. Oh, sorry. My apologies. I was not there. So what I mean is we take turns, 1, 1, 1, 1. You can do them in bigger sets too. All right, but we're here. Drop under, right? And then at the end of this, now we're both doing it. Nobody knows who's going, right? We're here. Thrust to the upper arm. And ran into the bag. Good use of terrain. Right? So, these interactions, again, cuts set up the thrusts. We do a drill like this in longsword that happens to be one of Richard's favorites. He's disturbingly fast at this variation. But yeah, there's that one. Any questions here? Oh, I'm like, where did my sheet blew away? Like, that's not the drill I was looking at.
Were there any questions?
No questions right now.
All right. Cuts into thrust. All right. So the next piece I actually got a little out of order on this one is that the defender will cover the thrust and riposte with a cut to the head. Forgot we'd written it that way. There's so many variations of this. But so as we take our turns, right, if I'm the attacker, right, I've come through, I've feinted, I've made my thrust, he's defended, and he'll cut me in the head. And I obviously don't want to let him, so I want to make sure that, right, I do all I'm doing, I do this, and as I go to thrust, I'm covered, right? So we play this same thing. Bravo. Right? straightforward. Any questions about the level that we forgot before? If there are no questions, I'll move on to demonstrating the next drill. This one is a variant of something that I borrowed from Damon Stiff. I actually call this drill Damon Special. It's built off of a Matreg stick fighting drill, cutting sequences and building on them. So what we're going to do initially here is we're going to build a sequence of the 4 corner cuts. So here, our initial cuts will be these. I will cut descending left, descending right, ascending left, ascending right. These are my 4 initial, right? Then Richard will do the same. So descending left, descending right, descending left, yeah. Descending left, descending right, ascending left, ascending right. And I'm going to cover. So far, yay. Doesn't seem like that much, right? But we'll go ahead and we'll make this, right? And I'll come. I went the wrong way. Let's try this again. And then Richard's turn. Right? So, seems simple. Now we're going to make it complicated. Let me make sure I follow the sequence as I wrote it down. I have to remember the order I added in this one. Oh, one restriction here is the defender must defend with joined hands. So here, we are not, what we're not going to do in defense, for example, is, Richard cuts his blow. I'm not going to do this. For the purposes of this drill, I will keep these together, right? So as he makes his blow, boom, 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 right? Which we were doing anyway, but I want to make it explicit. Movement of feet is encouraged. And in the next progression of this, the defender is allowed a single counterattack. So out of all the blows you make, if I see an opening, I can counter. Right, so we're here. And as before, we're going to keep the counter to the head. Nicely defended target, and it forcefully. If I can reach his head, I could have hit pretty much anything. Right, and now it's his turn, and if he sees an opportunity, he'll take it. Right, so I'm. Right, now he's the attacker. All right, his turn. Right, so what am I doing? This forces us to adjust so that I can't just get in the swing of lazily going boom, 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 boom. I have to be thinking defensively every step of the way. And I have to be thinking by joining them, if I move the sword, I move this. Right? Again, the title of this class was all about active offhand. Right? So here we're actively moving this offhand. For longsword fencers, this is a lovely intro drill, because if I'm used to fencing longsword, right? But you'll very rapidly see in terms of where I'm open, right? Boom, boom, boom. I'm open as I make those rising cuts. Versus if I do this sword and buckler style, right? That same place, I'm covered. Right? Because this requires the whole core twist. I can still do that. I can still drive here with my buckler above, but I'm never uncovered. What I want to avoid typically is situations exactly like this, where my buckler, I couldn't parry if I wanted, because I have to come around my own sword. Questions on this so far? All right. So now, the next stage. 4 sequenced attacks wasn't enough. We're going to try and build a sequence 10 deep, but we're going to reset every time somebody's hit. We'll be resetting a lot. The other thing is, I will build my sequence of attacks. He will build his sequence of attacks. Defenses are as you want. The only restriction, again, is that as much as possible, we're keeping the sword and the buckler or sword and shield joined on defense.
No counter.
What?
No counter.
No, we keep the counter here. Thus, I said we're going to be resetting a lot.
Gotcha.
Right? So now we'll start out as before, right? We do our initial 4. So I'll start. We're here. He'll do his initial 4. Right? And then I get to do 5. So let's build into the sequence. Let's demo it before we break it.
Gotcha.
All right, so I'll build into my 5, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'm going to throw a random thrust as my 5th. Right? Then Richard will throw his 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, and he hits me with his 5th. Bugger it. Right. Back to the base 4. Right? One of us screwed up and got hit. We start over again. Right? So now I launch my 4. Right? And then I do my 5. Yeah, I muffed that. Right? And he does his 5. I do my 6. And he'll do his. And I'll do my 7. All right. And he'll do his 7. We're both getting tired.
Yeah, fair.
Right? We get tired, we get slow. We get slow, we get hit. What's the first rule of Sword Fight Club? Don't get hit. Right? All right. So this is pretty much the tail of the full sequence we had. Let me look at the time we've got. And we are at 11:51. Given this time, I'd like to take a couple minutes to wrap up, and then we'll call it a session here. I can record another video later of us doing the same drills with the rotella and side sword for those who are interested. All right. Any questions from anybody right now? Let me get the chat open and see if I can add.
Nothing in the chat right now.
Yeah, I was going to try and send a file in the chat, but it doesn't seem to want to let me.
Let me see if I can give you permission.
Well, regardless, there is a set of notes for these that we will make available. I've sent it to the Swordsquatch Gmail, Lee.
Yes, and I'll also post it on our Facebook.
Awesome. And I can make it available, or any questions after the fact for anybody watching YouTube or anything after this. So, all right. Any questions? No? All right. So, basically at this point, thank you all for attending. I know it's a Saturday morning in a weird year. So we are grateful for everybody who's here. Hopefully you all learned something and had fun. We're always available for questions about this. Just be prepared if you ask me about anything Georgian, I will talk nonstop forever because it's Georgian sword and buckler and I love it to death. But we wanted to bring something here that would be hopefully helpful of people who practice any styles. These same drills we were just doing with the buckler can be done with a round shield, with any shield. The beauty of the puzzle drill is that it is infinitely adaptable, right? Like we talked about earlier, you know, pick up a different weapon, pick up a different offhand, and challenge yourself. Figure out how to get through. Figure out how to not get hit. Draw from the historical sources. Draw from your community, and teach yourself to be a better fighter. Our theory here is that the historical in, you know, historical martial arts or historical fencing or whatever people want to call what we do, really means that we can explain where what we do comes from. You know, it's not enough to be a good fighter. We have to understand the how and the where and the why of each piece. And what we tried to give today was here is a way to take your historical sources and build. So thank you all.
Thank you so much, Mike and Richard, for your awesome workshop today. I'm excited to take these drills back to my club and try them out, especially the on the knees. That just looks like an amazing workout on top of a good application.
It is. Wear knee pads or bring one of those little gardener pads if you're going to do it for a while.
Oh, and a note to the Lonan folks, we do have the puzzle mats, so we can use those as well.
Oh, yeah.
So I just wanted to thank you guys. I wanted to thank our amazing instructors for the week so far. If you had fun today, consider dropping us a donation. I dropped that link in the chat. Also, our merch is now up for this year. So this is one of the old shirts, but we have a really cool shirt this year that has an orca on it because we're trying to use Pacific Northwest animals in our art. And thank you again. So have a great day. The tournament is on now. It's on live on our Facebook and on Twitch. So we'll see you there.
All right.
Thanks all. Bye.
Yes.